Hello, Earth lovers, and thank you, Maria, for the introduction. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. I'm very excited to be here. And, well, I'm aware that I have a strong Spanish accent, so I'm going to try to speak nice and slowly. But we only have 15 minutes, so I better hurry up. My talk will be to open an internal debate that it might already exist within many of you. Perhaps we could have an actual discussion about it later over a drink. I will talk about the fact that clay plastering has become trendy, I would say, in the last decade. We can find it now in public spaces such as shops, restaurants, and in very fancy interior design magazines. But before I begin, let me give you a quick outline of who I am and how I got into clay plastering. I didn't expect the screen to be so big. I graduated in architectural interior design, but this degree left me unsatisfied with the poor quality and ultimately toxic building materials that we find nowadays in most conventional construction. So I therefore decided to study a master's in biology of building. This course taught me an holistic approach to building where common sense, health, and the environment were the key principles. I realized how clay plastering could have a hugely positive impact in our buildings. So I was soon committed to challenging conventional building methods. And it was at that moment that I decided to get my hands dirty and start my career as a natural plaster. Our society spends an average of 90% of our time in indoor spaces. It could be our homes, our workplaces, or means of transport. And risk groups such as elders or babies or sick people might exceed that percentage of time in the indoor spaces. So it's very important to make those buildings nice but healthy. The training of architects, engineers, and construction professionals are based primarily on technical and economical aspects, leaving aside the environmental ones. Perhaps in the past, we could get by without considering those environmental aspects because we were mainly building with natural materials. So there was less opportunity to make mistakes from a health point of view. I'm sure that many of you heard about all this sick building syndrome, no? And this is because since 1950, all the circumstances changed radically. And nowadays, we're using lots of synthetic and artificially manufactured materials in construction. And all of this results in an interruption of the natural environment. So many aspects of design are involved when we talk about ending in a sick building syndrome. But as I said, clay can have a very positive impact. So I'm just going to focus on the using of clay, which has been used for thousands of years around the globe. So let's take a look at everything that's great about clay plastering. So it's I'm sure that most of you are very familiar with all of this, but I think it's important to revise it. So it's an abundant material, healthy and sustainable. We find it mostly everywhere as a material to build with. We can work locally with it. They are hygroscopic. The hygroscopicity is the capacity of a material to absorb moisture from the air. When, for example, we're having a shower or we're drying our clothes or we're boiling the kettle, we create lots of moisture in the building. So if we have a building with glaze, it will absorb those boosts of moisture. So it regulates moisture and helps us to keep the indoor environment between 40 and 60%, which is the optimal for human health. The vapor permeability, which we always call it as the breathability of a building, is the ability of the material to allow water vapor to pass through it. I always compare this ability like if we were going for a walk with a Gore-Tex jacket or wrapped in a plastic bag. No? So moisture can go through. The thermal mass properties, which is the ability of the material to absorb and store and release heat. It can be from solar gains or the heating systems installed. Doesn't give toxic substances like most of conventional materials. Have positive psychological effects, so we bring in nature inside and connect us in an indirect way with the natural environment. I don't live in a, I wish I do, but not yet, in an earthen house, but I've heard this is a fact that neutralizes bad smells. It can be repaired and reused forever, which you cannot do with any other material. Doesn't create waste. You can wash your buckets, check the waste in the garden. It's anti-static, so it helps to keep a negative ionization of the air in the indoor environment and avoids the accumulation of dust. As a mineral material, it's fireproof, so it's not combustible, and in case of fire, it doesn't emanate toxic substances to the air, which is a big problem with fires nowadays with modern materials, is the toxicity when they burn. And the creativity that gives us the material, which I really enjoy, it's amazing. So yeah, it's an amazing material. Of course, it's getting trendy, and that's good. It's very good. But let's talk about the pros and cons about clay plastering being fashionable. The first pro, the fact that clay plastering is getting trendy, is that we are using clay instead of other nasty materials. We are bringing that natural environment inside, and by doing so, there are more examples of its use. So we're creating more public awareness about clay as a building material. The second pro is since clay plastering has become cool, I am not that much of a weirdo being a clay plasterer. But let's talk about the cons of clay plastering being trendy, because those are the ones that really worry me. Clay plastering can have a very positive impact, but it really depends on the overall construction system. As we are introducing clay plastering in this new modern way of construction, I can see that sometimes we are missing the point. I've been involved myself in projects where I felt very frustrated because I couldn't work with the material as I wish. So let's check out the different scenarios. I have a couple of pictures here of one of these scenarios that I was required to do clay plaster just as a finished layer. So this one, I want to comment because for me, when this project started, I was like, wow, you know. So the designers came with an amazing 3D render. Like, can you do this? And I saw the render. I was like, that's to simulate a 3D printed clay finish, which was weird. But yeah, so we made it by hand. We actually call this finish forking. I don't know if you can see it well, but we actually made it with forks. But to create all those shapes that we wanted to do it with a thick base coat of, oh, sorry. It's better? Yeah. So in this situation, we wanted to go with like a thick layer of clay to have all those properties, but because of timings and the architect concerns of not ever worked with clay, so it was not possible. So the contractor came and did like a chunky layer of cement for us to then go and do this nice finish over it. And the other example, for example, it was an existing wall that it was already painted with modern materials, so we just did the decorative layer over it. So what happens when we do it just as a finish? So we use clay, which is nice material. In that case, it wasn't the local material. It was not possible. So that's why I left it in question mark, but there must be other places where we use it just as a finished layer, but with local materials. So we lose the hygroscopicity because we don't have enough thickness. I left the question mark in vapor permeability because if the wall behind it is not vapor permeability, I can have clay over it, but the wall system will not be permeable. So it's something to consider as well. The thermal mass properties, we lost them again, and we keep the fact that it doesn't emanate toxic substances, and we keep the psychological effect. Well, we still keep few, but I'm already quite sad that we lost all of those and that there's like other products going before my plaster. Or if someone is gonna prepare the wall for me, maybe arrive and there is lots of cement patches and expanding foam everywhere, and I get super frustrated and upset. So bringing it to, so there's lots of examples of just the thin layer, but as a, bringing it to the limit for me is when is a clay plaster applied in a place with lots of high traffic. For example, in this store that I went the last few days to give a hand, everyone was super stressed. And so it's clay plaster, and if I don't tell you, I don't think you would even notice that it's clay plaster. And in this case, it was sprayed at the end with some sort of like water repellent product. And I understand the point. There's hundreds of people walking past that shop and touching, and they want to clean it all. But in that scenario, that's what we see. So we can protect our products with natural materials, like could be oil, water glass, wheat paste, casein, but sometimes as a plasterers, we don't have control of what is going on at the end of it. So we always try, but I'm just a plasterer. Yeah, so if we are in that scenario that we are going with a thin layer and someone put a sealant on the top, but I don't see much the point to have clay plaster anymore. I left the question mark about the possibility to work with the materials around because it could be possible. But then basically we are really keeping the fact that it's a clay posing, as I call it. No, it's just like the aesthetic of it because we lost most of the properties of clay as a material. And that really makes me sad when it's that case. And I don't want to be involved in that kind of work. And the problem is when we are involved in a project when it's already too late. And the industry is pushing us. There's new products coming into the market, which can be confusing a lot of people, that they are labeled as clay plastering. That happens the same with lime, that it might label as lime plastering and should say it contains lime or it contains clay, and same suppliers maybe suggest you to use some products that we really need to be careful with all of that. So for me, the ideal situation is this. So we dig and we chuck it into the wall, but I understand it's not always possible, and especially in your city, it's very difficult to do this. If I have a wheels machine, I'll be much better. I'm going to ask for those for Christmas. But yeah, I understand that sometimes the timings of the projects and the location of the project, but for me, it's like always trying to chat with contractors and architects. But the problem is that when we get to site, most decision and construction systems are already decided and in place. So to finish, I would like to encourage designers and owners to talk and involve craft people at the early stages to a project, ask for their advice about the construction system, and that way we can work together and achieve incredible, natural, and healthy results. I am sure that many of you agree with me, because ultimately, as craft people who care about the world we live in, we need to feel when we are constructing something, we are keeping the world we live in a beautiful and natural as possible. So thank you very much for listening. Sorry, I was very nervous. And I look forward to discussing the benefits of clay plastering over the drink. So come and find me. Thank you.